It's January 20, 2014. And even though the precious metals barely moved today, rhodium was up like 25 bucks, which is like 2 point something percent. And that's interesting. Interesting because rhodium has much less volume of trading than other precious metals like gold and silver. And it's more difficult to trade. For example, physical rhodium is a more complicated thing to buy than physical gold and silver, which you can just, get from like, a lot of online bullion dealers. And also too is rhodium derivatives. You can also invest in rhodium and derivatives, but also it is more complicated and less common than gold and silver. So I find rhodium a more interesting metal kind of when it moves. I think rhodium actually is more indicative of the commodity complex as a whole because there's less speculation by the general population than gold and silver. So that being said, maybe silver has seen its floor, or maybe not. Maybe $14 silver is still possible, but a lot of people are saying that the floor is now. Now, I know a lot of people out there want a definite opinion. They want you to say, yes, I'm making a call. In fact, some people will even say, well, why don't you at least stick your neck out there and make a call, whether it's the top or bottom? Well, if that's your mentality, I tell you one thing. If that's your mentality, you're not buying here and selling here, right? I've never met anybody with that mentality who's buying here and selling here, right? I'm not seeing that. That's it's kind of like they're saying, please lie to us. Tell us what we want to hear. So here's the chart of silver. Okay, so here's the 10-year chart of silver. And in this 10-year chart of silver, it's interesting because when I first started studying precious metals, I wanted to see what all these pundits said and when they started talking about silver. Like the Mike Maloney's who started talking about silver down here had a lot more credibility. It's like, wait a second, this guy was early in the game and it went up like he said it was, and it was going up a lot like he said it was. Wow, this guy must know what he's talking about. Until up here, when it started going here, and they started telling these, the stories got more ridiculous as the price started falling and defying their stories, and they created more stories. And it was a phenomenon of human nature. So for someone casually observing, they'd say, these people are crazy. How can they get more entrenched with the ridiculous stories? And how come people will keep believing the ridiculous stories even as the price goes down? They're telling people to buy on the way down, and yet they're still heroes. Well, I've got a different story for you. This one relates to human nature and even markets. It's the one of Hiroo Onoda. I read that he passed away today. Now, this guy was a Japanese holdout. He was living in the mountains on this island in the Philippines for 29 years after the World War II had ended. So World War II had ended, and he was there for 29 years still fighting the war. Why was that? Because he would not believe the war had ended unless it came from what he considered a credible source. The radio announcements, the flyers, the rumors, all these things he didn't believe for 29 years because it had to come from a credible source. In fact, it was eventually he and several men were on that island, and they had killed people. The war was over, and they were still killing people on that island doing their mission. Now, that's a real believer. That's a real believer. The war's over, and he's still following orders, his old orders, because this new information was not considered a trusted source. He had his trusted sources, and that's it. So when you watch some of these silver channels, that they started making videos right around here. Some of them will say they've been investing and talking about silver down here, but the fact of the matter is they didn't start making videos here, and they started making videos as it went down. There are several of them. Some of them are very popular. And in their comments, people say a trusted source, a trusted source. Somehow, these channels earn the trust of people, even though they've been so wrong, it's almost criminal. Yet they're considered trusted because they will repeat the catchphrases, they will say the things that people with silver up here wanted to hear, and they're a trusted source. In fact, if you talk about silver here, and it went here, and now you weren't big on silver, you are no longer a trusted source, and you were being attacked and mocked by some of these channels, even though you were right about the price. And as someone had said, I was not saying sell up here, but I was not saying buy up here. Actually, I never really said sell or buy, but what I sounded up here was different. What I sounded here was different than here. Now, right here, maybe I'm sounding different. This could be the floor. But we don't know. It could go to 15 or 14. We don't know for sure. And if someone promises they know, they don't know. They're guessing. They might be right. Maybe the chances are greater than not that this is the floor. But they don't know for sure. So, I mean, what happens here is there are some guys like who had made promises, and they are right every time until here, and then they were really wrong. So, going back to this guy was, for 29 years, this guy was in the jungles, the jungle island mountains in the Philippines, and he and his men had shootouts with the police, they had killed people, they were destroying property, and only when the Japanese government had found his previous commander, who was a retired like bookseller, came to the guy, then he believed it was over, and then he wrote a book. He was greeted with a hero's welcome in Japan because of his he had something the current Japanese people 29 years thought maybe they had lost. Maybe the sense of duty and the honor and the ideology over materialism and all these things. He was very popular. So yes, on YouTube, you know, rejecting materialism as this happens, choosing ideology. Well, sometimes I think that's good, but I mean this is the whole another matter there. But anyhow, this is the most fascinating discussion over human nature of this guy. He was doing his duty, and he was pardoned by the Philippine president, even though that him and his men, and some of his men had died, some of them had surrendered and left, and by 29 years he was the last holdout of that group of people. And he ended up going to Brazil and raising beef, raising cattle, and he married a tea etiquette teacher. This sounds very alternative media-ish, you know, going to an organic farm, and there are aspects that are pretty cool. And this guy, I mean, look at this guy's picture. This guy was very charismatic. He looked very trustworthy, but he believed that cause so much. Anything else is propaganda. Anything else is propaganda to convince him otherwise. And he was still going to kill people if he had to on his mission, even though the World War II was over for 29 years. And there's a parallel here with belief systems going on. Okay, so maybe we hit the bottom, maybe we didn't. That's for you to decide. Thanks for watching.